Hi, welcome back to the channel. Quite a while ago I did a video on the ultimate side bass in Vital, and ever since then I've had people ask me for a similar video only on Serum. So here we are, this is it. Right, so the first thing we're going to do, we're going to create a VB1 like saw. Now a VB1, for those who don't know, was a guitar emulation in one of the early Cubase versions. It sounded absolutely horrible as a guitar, but when bastardized for a purpose not intended, just like the TB303, it took on a whole new life and sounded awesome as a side bass. So we're going to emulate that here. Not identically, but the same kind of character. So you'll notice I've changed the x-axis on the wavetable editor to 24 and the y-axis to 21. And then once we've done that, we can draw in a downward saw, like so. Go to the halfway point and you'll see it's below halfway now. That's exactly what we want, because then we start from the right hand side and we go backwards and we will end up with a spike like so, which is perfect. There are other ways to do this. I know Shep has quite a good technique, but that results in a variable wavetable, but we just want it fixed, so this is the easiest way to do it, I think. So now we have our basic saw. Let's now add a filter to that, and we'll assign that to envelope 2. Just make sure that's on unipolar, like so. Turn it down. And we have something that can broadly be classed as a side bass. Turn random phase down on the oscillator, because we never want that. Turn resonance down. And now this is where the fun begins. So let's go into the menu and we'll copy oscillator A to B, like so. Then in oscillator A, we're going to clear all the high frequencies. So clear bin 2 to end, like so. Let's just mute oscillator B for the moment. And then we'll just play back what we have in an oscilloscope. And you'll notice that it is just a sine wave. But we knew that anyway because, well, we could see it. But also that's what the fundamental is. The fundamental is a sine wave. So in that case, why waste an oscillator slot for that? Instead, let's add it as a sub, turn the level down a bit, and we will reinstate oscillator A by copying it from B, like so. But we obviously don't want to double up on the fundamental. So in bin 1, we do clear low frequencies, like so. So now we have the sub and everything above in oscillator A. So we're slowly getting there, but what we do want is oscillator A to be the second harmonic, which is this one here. So with the fundamental, then the second harmonic. So in bin 3, we do clear high frequencies, bin 3 to end, and now this is the second harmonic. And then you probably guessed in oscillator B, then we need to do clear low frequencies, which is bin 1 to 2, like so. So the path now goes left to right. Fundamental, first harmonic, and then everything above. If we now turn on the filter for oscillator A and B, and also the sub, we're exactly where we were before. Subject maybe to a few level adjustments for each of these. But we can do those now. So let's put on a Pro Q, or any EQ will do for that matter. Let's turn A and B up. It's not essential, but the only reason why I do that is because that gives a value of 100, so it's just easy to work out percentages and things later. And just to demonstrate further for those who weren't following, as I said, this is this first harmonic here, which is this little spike here. This is the first harmonic. So if I turn this down, you will see this spike, or this bump or notch or bell or whatever you want to call it, decrease, like so. So now it's completely gone, or it's back up to where it should be. Similarly, I can do the same for the sub, and that's this one here. That now disappears, or everything above, so node 3 or notch 3, everything above will drop now, like so. So let's just fine tune this. I want the first harmonic to be roughly in line with the third, or the second harmonic I should say. This is is all just a preference and whatever suits the track. I'll no doubt come back and adjust this later. And then for the sub, let's do the same. I want that relatively in line also. Like so. It's 1 octave too high, so let's turn this down on all 3 oscillators. Right, so now we're starting to get there. Ultimately, what we're trying to achieve is room for the kick. Because you have the kick and the bass clashing, it will sound muddy, and the overall loudness will not be optimized. So let's turn the grid down to 4, like so. Let's put in 4 solid blocks like that. And let's turn the second one up. And we're going to assign this one to the sub. Let's turn it down. And if we look at Pro Q over to the right here, you will see on the first bass note that this is ducking. You can see the sub duck every time the first bass note hits. You'll notice also, if you look very closely, the very lowest point of this is red, which means that it's going too far into the negative. And what I mean by that is the modulation is down at minus 100, whereas the value is already set to 30. So the maximum negative modulation is 30, if that makes sense. Anything below that is just redundant. So now you can see that there's no red, or if we put this to minus 31, you can see we've now got red. So that's as I said, redundant. So let's change this back to 30. That's the max modulation depth that we need. And while we're here, let's assign a macro to that. So let's put that here, macro 1, and let's call this fundamental. So now when I play this back and have the macro on 0, there'll be no change to the fundamental ducking. Every note is exactly the same, but when I turn this up, you can see it start to drop on the first bass note. Like so. Let's now copy this across to LFO2. And we're going to do pretty much the same, but we're going to assign this one to the first harmonic. Turn this all the way down. Again, we're in red because we're at 74. So let's put the maximum depth at 74. And once again, let's assign a macro to that. So this one is the first harmonic. And we'll play this back and exactly the same should happen. Ducking on the sub, turn this up, and now we have ducking on both. Just on the first bass note, just where this is. So we have the kick, first bass, second bass, and third bass. So by ducking there, we're leaving room for the tail of the kick, which generally ends somewhere between the 1/16th and the 1/16th dotted, so around here. Let's copy this over once again onto LFO3, and then we go into the effects and we add a compressor. And no, don't worry, we're not going to compress it. Click on mix and we get a level value. Assign LFO3 to level, ensure it's unipolar like the previous ones, and turn it down. Once again, we're into negative because we don't need to go more than 50 because we're in the middle. It's unipolar, don't forget. And as you can hear, we now only have the second and third bass notes playing. Or if you want some visualization of that, you can see it here in our oscilloscope. This is where the kick is, and this is where the second or the first bass note should be, but we don't have that anymore because we're fully ducking it. So let's do the same. Let's add a macro to that and call this duck. Now our first bass note is back, but if we turn the macro up, then boom, it disappears. And then it's back. You'll notice it looks slightly different from the second and third. That's because we have the fundamental and harmonic turned down. If we turn them back, then all three bass notes are identical. Let's just play with the envelopes now a bit. Make sure you turn the phase down, otherwise there's phase cancellations with the sub. And then the envelope's really just personal preference, really. Same as the cutoff. Next we need to go and check out our levels. So if we go to fader here and pay attention to this number here, which is currently minus 4.4. It's minus 11.3 now, so we can put this up a little bit. Adjust the master output. I usually work to a kick of minus 10 and a bass of minus 12. So let's keep it there. It helps explain the next step, which is if we go to the kick and bass bus like so, and I'm going to mute the bass for the moment and just play back. This is just the kick running through the kick and bass bus. And it is set to, it is minus 10 or minus 10.1. And that's because the kick itself is on minus 10. Makes sense, right? Now if we add the bass to that, and we'll turn down the ducking of the fundamental and also of the first harmonic. And you can see that we're no longer at 10.1. Granted, it's not that much of a difference, it's only 0.2. But what that illustrates is that the kick and the bass are colliding. So we have a situation where the kick is in this first 16th, is overlapping into the first bass note, and this section here is increasing by 0.2 dB. As I said, 0.2 dB isn't the end of the world, but in a lot of circumstances that number can be quite a lot more significant, which is why we've set up this patch the way we have. So now, if we play this back, and I was to cut the fundamental from the first note, you will see this 9.9 drop back to minus 10.1. I might need to resort to the first harmonic and even to ducking, but we'll see how we go. So if I turn up the ducking of the fundamental, so you can see that's all it took. Just a little bit of the cutting of the fundamental. A bit more. In circumstances where it would require more than that, then the next step would be to take out the first harmonic. Basically, you would adjust the fundamental until you hear a difference or until you don't like the sound, then go to the first harmonic, and then if that's still not working, then you resort to the duck. But you probably don't want to go this far, you don't want to gallop. More like that, I would say. And you can see we're still at minus 10.1, and I think that's sounding quite good. The next thing I would do just to round off this patch would be I would assign the fourth macro to the envelope cutoff like so, and that essentially adjusts the brightness. I should also point out, in case you're seeing LFO tool here, the only thing LFO tool is doing is cutting the first where the kick is. There's nothing there anyway from the bass, as you can see, but it's just in case, and also just rounding off the third bass note so that there's nothing overlapping into the kick, but it's quite insignificant. It's even cutting off before that anyway, so it's not really having that much of an impact. The vast majority of the processing is within Serum. And then one final tweak is to add an EQ, put that before the compressor. We want to cut out any nasty ringy tones in around the 300 mark. So let's turn the gain down a bit, and then we'll put the frequency to 300 as I said, or around 300. So that's with and without. We'll just play back to kick and bass. So without EQ and then with, you can really hear when you turn it off. We have that nasty mid-range which just sounds ringy and horrible. So there we have it, a super clean VB1 like forest bass in Serum. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.